Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everybody a couple of seconds to get in and get settled. For those of you who are joining from the Passable app, if you start to experience any audio issues or connectivity issues, feel free under the presentation window. There is a link to join via the Zoom app, and we're finding that some people are having a better experience via that application. I will be cross-posting from both chats. So if you share in the Passable chat, I will share it with the Zoom and vice versa. If you need any technical support, please feel free to send me a private message through the chat in Zoom or through the chat in Passable. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Deb Gilman.
Hi, everyone. So we're all here for the sushi talk, right? So I'm gonna get grounded for a minute with everybody and really talk about, the purpose of this workshop is really to present like a compilation of ideas, techniques, and approaches for how you can recognize and respond to resistance at the collaborative table. Some of them might be new. Some of them might be things that you've heard before. In no way is this every way that we can respond to resistance, but I feel like we could go on and talk about this for a while, so I had to stop somewhere. So what I really want you to think about as we're talking today and meeting today is developing a personal philosophy for how you want to deal with resistance at the collaborative table, and maybe even in your personal life as well, and just your professional life. Really, the effective management of resistance, I think, is a pivotal point in helping people to change. So as we're dealing with people who are going through significant change and transformation in their lives, to have a good collaborative process, I think means also having a good philosophy on dealing with resilience. So your personal philosophy for resistance should provide you with techniques for dealing with resistance that are built from really understanding the dynamics of client resistance. So what does it represent psychologically? And it might not just be one thing, right? It might be a lot of different things. And also how you can then develop an approach to really manage it at the table. And even more than that, I will challenge you to think about how to see it coming or how to predict that it might come before it actually even shows up. I think that would be a great way to have your personal resistance philosophy. So highly resistant clients are really experts at making us feel pretty incompetent, right? Makes us feel like we're ineffective as professionals in a lot of ways. And I want us to think about, as we're going through this talk today, that if you have an ability to control the resistance or roll with the resistance, you actually are going to be able to control the amount of stress that you feel as a professional sitting at the table. And we know that if we can control our stress, then the client also feels like their stress can also be controlled, and they can manage that as well. So I did have a little bit of a poll that at the beginning that I had you contemplate what type of resistant behavior is really the most difficult for you to have. So if you haven't filled that out, that's okay. In some of my handouts, I also put on here all the different resistant behaviors that we're going to talk about today. And I thought, as we talk about this, I'd like you to think up what word or feeling comes to mind when we're looking at how we're recognizing resistance. So arguing is a pretty probably obvious, right? Resistant behavior. The client contests the accuracy, the expertise, or the integrity of the professionals, maybe even of the collaborative process. Maybe even they're arguing with their spouse sitting across from them. But the arguing comes through. I think almost all of us would say absolutely arguing is a resistant behavior. The next one is I chose this slide because I had a client once say, this is total BS, right? So the client is challenging directly the accuracy of what a team member has said. Or maybe in the case of the client that I had, didn't like his spouse's goals, felt like her interests were complete BS. And then the whole process was then BS as well, right? Or clients discount the validity or the authority or the efficacy of the team member or the process. And they also may be very hostile. So they're directly expressing hostility to the team or toward their partner. This particular BS person I'm thinking of slammed stuff down and left the room. So that was a very hostile, very challenging, and discounting all at once. Interrupting. That is another definite resistance behavior. So the client breaking in and interrupting the team or maybe their spouse in a very defensive manner. That can show up as talking over. So the client speaks while others are talking without waiting for an appropriate pause or silence, or they might even cut off the other person. You're like, now, wait a minute, I've heard enough of this. I'm not going down this path anymore. Denying is also another resistant behavior. So this might show up as like an unwillingness to recognize that there is a problem or that it exists, inside the meeting or even outside the meeting. Having difficulty cooperating, maybe taking responsibility, doing the homework, taking advice from the team. Also, we might have things show up as inattention, not answering questions, not responding, maybe even some hand crossing and sitting back or turning away from the table, maybe sidetracking. These are all ignoring behaviors. So the client is showing evidence either in what they're saying or what they're doing of ignoring the team and not really wanting to be on board in the meetings. So certainly if I asked you guys, you could probably think of other things that you've seen, but I think these are sort of like the main categories of what we see when we think of our client being resistant, right? And so before, again, we can develop our personal approach to managing resistance, we really have to understand why our clients might resist change. Why might they not be interested in listening, or why might they be trying to argue with you? It really does have a purpose, right? And so I think from a psychological standpoint, as a psychologist, I have been trained for many, many years to understand what is behind resistance, and that there are actually a lot of benefits to resistance, not only with our work with our clients, but if you think about resistance from just our daily lives and our own mental health, resistance can actually be a good thing. I mean, if we didn't have a resistance or have a little bit of questioning about things when they change, we would probably fall for every scam. People would just railroad us all the time. We wouldn't challenge anything. We wouldn't challenge authority. We wouldn't recognize when our personal rights were being violated. So there are some good things about us as humans resisting change or even questioning change when it starts to happen. But as collaborative professionals, and I think professionals in all of what we do, we can take it very personally when the client reacts to our change initiatives with resistance, right? So how come they don't understand that divorce is change? Why doesn't our client understand that they're going to have to get a job, or that they have to follow a different budget, or that they have to share their kids, across two homes? How can they be so irrational? We come up with all of these, I think kind of negative words to label our clients. They're difficult, they're stubborn, defiant, they're like a little Cartman. If you guys know South Park, that's who's dancing on the screen. So we can think of them as just being kind of spoiled. You know what? I'm going to do whatever I want. And for us, that might be hard. And for a collaborative process, that pulls up some different emotions for not only the professionals at the table, but for the other spouse as well. But I think that what we have to remember is that there is this period that we're meeting our clients at where they don't know what is next. There's so many unknowns. And so anthropologists would call this a liminal space. If you heard my talk from the child specialist a few months ago, this is what I really focused on, is this space of not knowing. It's loss, it's waiting. The rules haven't been defined. So all of this represents chaos. Like, what are we supposed to do? We knew that something was this way before separation. Now we're in this period of like, and then we're going to a place where we don't even know what's next. The rules have not been defined. So as the system, the family system, and the spouses are trying to figure out what comes next, there is this huge place where there's just void and uncertainty, fear, anxiety. So we have to understand that in that chaos, there's going to be some resistance because they don't know what is coming next. And it's hard to just accept things if you don't know if you can accept them. So this is the Satir model. Virginia Satir was a family therapist. So she came up with her little model about what happens when people have to change. And really, in her model, you can see that there's no change without resistance. So you see that liminal space. I circled it. The old status quo, a foreign element comes in. That's the divorce or the separation. And then there's resistance. And then because there's chaos and there's confusion until they can get over to that green area where there's like a transforming idea. Something happens that helps them start to see there's a pathway out, and they can integrate that into a new status quo. So from this model, it's not that clients don't want to see. It's not that they're in complete denial. They know they're at the table. They know they're getting a divorce. They know what's going to happen. It's not that they don't care, that they're not motivated to make these changes. It really is just that they're in such early stages of change, this liminal space, that they have yet to hit that transforming idea that's going to get them to where they need to go. So our job, when we know that our clients are resisting, when they're in this liminal space and they just can't adopt everything that we're telling them to do all of the time, we have to get them to have some movement so that they can get to that transforming idea. We assume, and sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's not, that clients are ready to change because they're sitting at the table, when they really may be in this stage of pre-contemplation or contemplation. Highly resistant clients are almost always in those first two stages, pre-contemplation or contemplation. And if we can understand that, if we can be with them in that stage where they are, we're going to be able to adjust our approach and our goals relative to their ability to change, to what we see is their ability to change in that space and time. Then we have a much more cooperative relationship, because it's really, we could be the best at what we do, but until we really know the client, until they feel heard, until they feel like we are really getting them, they don't care what we know. They're not going to hear it. They're going to fight with us the entire time. So we may inadvertently create resistance if we can't adjust the way we're interacting with our clients to see what's really happening. And they, like I said, they're not going to even care what we're doing if we're not hitting them in that place. So I'm curious, there's no poll for this or whatever. I just want you to think in your own heads before we move on. Would you rather have a client who does everything you suggest, or would you rather have a client who takes time to adjust to the new ideas? Which to you, and we're developing your philosophy, right? So which to you is more frightening as you move to develop your personal resistance philosophy? I know which one is more frightening for me, but I'm curious, for you guys, jot it down, think about it as we continue to talk and move forward. Okay, so we are talking about why people want to stay in that period of resistance. One thing that comes up frequently is that people are just comfortable, right? And we are thinking that, having familiar things taken away before our clients feel safe makes it very difficult for them to think about not having their safety nets. Even though this doesn't look to me like a place where I would particularly be comfortable, for other people, that is their comfort zone. And so us understanding that not having their dysfunction means that they're going to have to think of something else. They're going to have to do something else. They're going to have to make changes that are going to feel uncomfortable, even if they're better. That's a hard thing, because people, we want our sameness, or we want our safety, our predictability. And if we don't have that, we're not sure if we're going to be able to move ourselves forward. So I think as we go through these, thinking about, okay, these are not necessarily the most definitive list of every resistant behavior we're going to see, and nor is it mutually exclusive. So someone might be comfortable in their dysfunction, and they might have a couple other things that we're going to talk about as we go down the list. Loss of control. So when change happens, it interferes with autonomy. And it makes people feel like they've lost control of their territory, of their life, of their sense to self-determination, so that they are able to choose the path that they want to go in. So people feel very out of control, and they try to control anything that they can, especially if they're not the spouse that initiated the divorce. It might make them feel they're there because of someone else. They don't want this to happen. This wasn't their choice. And so when they're in the collaborative process, they want to make sure that they have control and that they're making the choices that they want to make if things have just been thrust upon them. People also might just have a personality type that likes to be in control. And so you might see that show up a lot. They might enjoy the battle. That might be part of their marital dance, right? And we're getting pulled into it as the collaborative team, that their dance of dysfunction and difficulty letting go of control in their marriage has now come into our meetings. And so if we can understand how we can give them a little bit of control, or even look at this as, okay, this person is feeling a loss of control, we may be able to do something a little bit differently. So again, when people feel that there has been not enough time to get used to an idea or prepare for the consequences, or if they even know what the consequences are, that liminal space, change is resisted. And it is always easier to say no to something than it is to say yes, particularly if that thing means they're going to have to give something up, or they're going to have to change in some way that is pushing them again out of their comfort zone. Again, if somebody was surprised by the divorce, or if they aren't the initiator of the divorce, flexing their power at the table and being resistant may actually feel like the only thing that they have right now in their life. The other thing that they might be doing is not agreeing to things because they're trying to avoid additional pain. If there's something that happened that was a negative surprise, they don't want to have more negative surprises. So how do I prevent myself from having more negative surprises? I say no. I keep everything the way it is, because it's like an adjustment reaction. I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to adjust because I'm so afraid what's on the other side of me having to adjust. So we can blame the brain for a lot of this. Staying Alive is not just an awesome song from the year I was born, but it also is the role of our brain. So we are supposed to, our brain is supposed to keep us alive, right? We are hardwired to resist change because 5 times a second, at a very unconscious level, our brain is scanning the environment to make sure that we're safe. So it's saying, are we safe? Are we not? Are we safe? Are we not? If the brain feels like we are not safe, again, very unconsciously, it is releasing hormones to our body that are saying, uh-oh, something's happening. And then we get an emotion, and then we say we are afraid. So we have to remember that people have to feel safe to be able to change. Innate change will happen when perceived costs of the maladaptive behaviors outweigh the benefits of doing something different. So when our brain sees that if we keep operating the way we're operating, we have increased stress, we have increased fear, we have increased physiological symptoms maybe. So when those things are being interpreted as our body of being the cost of not moving forward, then we'll start to rethink the way that we're operating or our position, and we'll start trying to do something different. So we certainly can blame our brain for not being able to make changes. And we also have to remember that our fear-based brain is not logical. So our fear-based brain can get us stuck in patterns that are super unhelpful, and we may not even recognize it because we're not using our logic part of our brain. And we also probably don't want to hear it from other people telling us that we have to change because we're afraid, because our amygdala has kicked in to tell us, do not make this change. It's bad for you. Okay. The other thing that can happen is that the client is way behind these changes. Everything is so different that the routine has shifted. The way things are happening in their day-to-day lives are no longer automatic. They're no longer, you can just function or go through the motions of life. So too many changes at once can be really confusing, and it can be really distracting. Change is meant to bring something different, but how different and how quickly that difference happens can really impact how resistant our clients are. So if their security, their predictability, their comfort and stability has gone completely, like the whole floor dropped out from underneath them, we have to help get them grounded before they're even going to be able to think about making decisions or having some clarity, because things have gotten just too overwhelming for them. Couple that with surprise, with the brain, all these other things we've talked about, and you can see why this could be very, very likely to show up at the collaborative table. So the other thing that happens is that divorce is really hard, right? And it can be very overwhelming. Sometimes when all of these changes have happened and people are entering the collaborative process, they just may have hit their tolerance level for change. They may have exceeded their ability to really cope with anything more. So homework that we're giving them that they're not completing doesn't mean that they're jerks and they don't think that we're helpful people. It just means they might not be able to do it. They may have hit a point of saturation and exhaustion. And, they could have a personality where they want to avoid responsibility. Maybe they were more codependent in their relationship than either of them have told us, the professionals, or that we have realized. They might want sympathy. They might want the attention that not doing the work gives them, right? Falling into this. But even if that is the sort of reasoning behind it, it's going to make it a lot harder for them to take on challenges, to make decisions. They might pull back from the team. They might cancel meetings, not want to come to the meetings. They're feeling hopeless. They're feeling like there's no point in trying to change because they just cannot take on one more thing. And so really they're psychologically drained. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And that has to be something that we're making sure that we're checking in with the clients, so that if that is something that's happening, we're identifying it at the table instead of putting, a label on them. We're thinking about, has their tolerance level been exceeded? So sometimes there's concerns about competence, right? So I think about this as sort of like the fear of failure. Sometimes people have already feel like they failed coming in to see us. I failed at my marriage. So what else am I going to fail at? So everything becomes, I can't. Their fear of failure, fear of their future, fear of, whether or not they can succeed after the divorce process turns into, I can't. Other people maybe have very conservative values. Maybe they're not people that take risks. So the fact that we're putting onto them, or the divorce has put onto them, right? This need to take a risk and change what they're doing, it presents a real giant barrier for them, because any change feels way too risky. And they don't want to take risks just because that's who they are, whether they had a divorce or not. They're not risk-taking people. They don't change things. So we might have to look at what we're asking them to do, why we're asking them to do it, making sure they know where we're going, and that maybe also allowing them to see that, we'll support them through. So, not labeling them, not coming down on them if homework isn't done, or if they haven't, followed some of the things that we want them to follow, but trying to figure out what it is that has gotten them to that I can't place. Oops, I'm going backwards. Okay. There also is, with divorce, we know a loss of belonging, a loss of identity. So by definition, change is a departure from the past. We know that in divorce, it's a definite change from the past, right? When you've spent years living a certain way, that becomes your reality and your worldview. Sometimes it's generational reality and worldview. So there's this maybe shame that comes along with it. There's this feeling maybe of guilt, right? For some people, a feeling of maybe having social implications, family implications. Maybe there is something of them that resistance is preserving. It's preserving an important aspect of their self or their identity. I once had, if you saw my child specialist talk, I had a little girl, super insightful 9-year-old girl, said, Dr. Gilman, who am I if we are not us? She was talking about her family. Like, she could not even fathom who she is if her family wasn't there. And I think that, some adults that we work with would also maybe say the same thing. Who am I if we are not us? This poor tomato doesn't even know. He thought forever he was a vegetable, but now he finds out he's a fruit, right? It's like shocking for all of us. And so I think that, remembering to think about your clients and their identity as you're going through the meetings and you guys are talking with your clients and getting to know them, that resistance could really bring up feeling, or could really be because of a feeling of loss of belonging. We also sometimes see that hurt and pain causes resistance. I'm sure you guys have had cases where, you're making progress, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, that came up again. the affair came up again. We thought we resolved the affair. It's coming up again. Oh my gosh. And now we're not getting to agreement, or, we thought we had an agreement, but here we go. We're talking about the affair again. These are things that the hurt and the pain are so important, again, to recognize, because those ghosts of the past are always sitting there. They're always waiting to come back, and they're hard to really shake off. And people see really no way out of the pain and the hurt, even if they made an agreement to, financial stability, and maybe they've got their custody figured out. Those old wounds and those resentments are still there. And so you have to remember that when they come up, we have to acknowledge them, and we have to figure out what we have to do with them. So again, like I said, this is not the most exhaustive list, but I do think, we exploring what underlies client dynamics, I want you to shift and to think that clients are not just stubborn and resistant. There might be some things that they're doing that have a lot of good explanation to them, and we need to just get out of our mindset of them being, these sort of bad clients or not collaborative, and getting to a place where we are really understanding them, and we're having our philosophy about how we're going to deal with these things when they come up, that's not labeling and not using, the resistant word. So in Gestalt therapy, there is a quote that says, clients do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so there's this real sense of being genuine and being at the table and being able to care that is going to be important when you're dealing with resistant clients. So I want you to remember ORs, and I like ORs for a couple reasons. One, I think it's easy to remember, but it also has a really great sense of motion. So if you go to paddle up a creek and you don't have a paddle, you're stuck in your boat and you're just going to circle around and around, right? But so when we come to the table with our paddle that we can use for resisted clients, our ORs, we're going to be able to get through even the toughest water because we have a tool to do it. So these are our tools, right? So we're going to use open-ended questions and commands. And I'm going to challenge you to turn a lot of your questions into commands for our resistant clients. And I'll tell you why as we go on to that. Affirmations, reflective listening, and then slowing the pace. So I think we should use ORs early and often. In the motivation literature for therapy, using ORs to evoke change is used early, it's used often. With our resistant clients, even before they're resistant, I want us to think about using our ORs skills. We're going to bring them to the table, and right when we get in that boat, we're going to start paddling. We're going to explore the patient's world, and we're going to elicit and explore their motivation for change. They may not have any right now, but we're going to keep eliciting and exploring their motivations for changing and moving through their divorce transition in a healthy way. So when I want you guys to think about asking great questions. This is the Grand Bazaar in Turkey. And I think when you ask a great question, what it should do is open up all of these different pathways, just like in the Grand Bazaar in Turkey, where you're stepping into territory that's like amazing and fascinating. And oh my gosh, how did we get there? Because you asked a really good question. You could even ask an okay question. And if you asked it the right way, with genuine curiosity, genuinely wanting to understand your client's world, you will get this pathway to open up, and you will see all these different worlds that you could explore. And as long as you don't go in saying, I'm going for the jewelry, I'm going for the jewelry. If you go in saying, wow, what's at this bazaar? Like I said, very curious, you're going to see your client be able to open up. And if you're really, really listening to what your client is saying, not moving on to the next question, not expecting, them to answer the way you want them to answer, you're going to know where to go. You're going to know what pathways to take. So a good question is really simple. It's maybe 5 words. You don't need this big startup. I once heard someone say it's like, the beginning of a James Bond movie. Like the movie comes on and there's action, like right away. You see James Bond doing something amazing and you're like, this is going to be a great movie. Same thing with your question. It doesn't need this huge intro to the question you're about to ask. Ask the question. Try to use 5 words or less. And boom, you've gotten your client's attention and we're moving into the action. The other thing I will say is don't just stop when they've answered your question. Try to say, and what else? They call this the AWE question, AWE. So you ask a question, what's the real challenge here for you? What's been really difficult here for you? And then they answer and you say, and what else? And then you wait and they respond and you say, and what else? And you keep asking these questions until you have found the thing that is the most important to them, or maybe all the things that are important to them. And until they say, there really is nothing else, I think that's it, then you've hit it, right? So it's just continuing to ask, continuing to dig. Not just stopping when you get to the one place, right? Think of this Turkish bazaar. You want to see the whole bazaar. So they might show you one hallway, but we want to see the whole thing. So this is converting questions to curious commands. And I think that why it's important to think about not asking a question is that there can be a power differential between somebody who is resistant and then the professional. Like the professional's, telling me what to do, or the professional's asking me something. Maybe they're trying to trick me. I don't really know. So usually the conversation can feel less threatening if it doesn't feel like it's excessive questioning. So instead of saying, can you tell me? We just might say, tell me. Tell me a bit more about your concern. Explain something about, your neighborhood. I don't know. So you can fit these things together and you're able to still have that naive puzzlement, that curiosity, the little bit of that Columbo, or as one of my colleagues affectionately says to me, when you play your dumb blonde. No offense to any of the blondes out there. I didn't take it offensively. I reframed it as I'm really good at being curious. So that you are, putting all of these things together and you're softening it for the client so they don't feel like they're on the hot seat or they're, being cross-examined. And you're actually feeling, you're giving them a feeling that you're very curious. And maybe even that you're confused a little bit, right? You don't really know. This also prevents us from sometimes asking a question that we think we know the answer to already, or that the client could interpret that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, which again can bring up resistance. So if we just give a curious command, they can't interpret that we are looking for some sort of specific answer. And we also aren't probably giving them the feeling that we're looking for an answer. And again, it allows us not to kind of mine for the answer that we want. Sometimes people, do that because we think we know, and we think that we know what their answer will be. So we might just keep asking and mining for this answer. It's so much easier if you can just change your question into a command. Another way that I sometimes like to think about this is almost as if an alien landed, or no, maybe we went to an alien planet. That would probably be the better way. If we went to like Mars and there were aliens there, and we didn't want to make any social faux pas, we didn't want to do anything that could get us, injured or in some kind of bad way. So we just want to listen and hear everything about Mars that we can possibly listen to, that the aliens are going to tell us, so we understand their world and we understand how to live in their world. So again, it's curious. We want to know about their world. We want to understand what's going on. If someone watched our meetings, it would be like the clients were the experts and all of us experts were just sitting there like with our mouths open, like, wow, this is amazing. We want them to be teaching us about them, because that is how we're going to be able to move them through what matters to them. Okay, so now we have the A part of our ORs, affirmations, right? So they are able who think they are able. Like we said in the beginning, when we were looking at all those different changes that are happening, they can be really overwhelming. And for people who are maybe risk averse or people who don't even want to be there, they don't necessarily feel like they can make it. And so we know from literature, from the psychological literature of change, that change happens when there's perceived importance and people have belief in their ability to change. Belief in their ability to change. This is huge for us sitting at the table and trying to affirm our clients. We want them to feel as though they are supported, feel as though they have what it takes to not only participate in our process, but to then have their life after the process is over. So any little thing that we can give them as an affirmation is so important. I know you were nervous about coming to the meeting today. I am so glad you showed up, and look how great you did, right? So after the meeting, being able to give them some positive feedback. Thank you for just showing up today. Thank you for trusting us to have this difficult conversation at the table. So then the next meeting, they're going to have a difficult conversation again. And as they chip away with these difficult conversations, resistance goes down and motivation to change and agreement can actually happen. So we want to get the people from the I can't and I'm stuck to move into the I can. Again, we have to support their self-efficacy in being able to do this. So many clients in the divorce process are fearful of the future. Again, the rules haven't been established. Go back to that liminality slide where there was that big open cavernous place. Are they just going to fall into the cavern, or are they going to go on the other side of the mountain through that door? Hopefully they're going to go through that door, but they don't know. And we know that we can help them move forward, but they don't know if they can. And so again, it's making sure that we're recognizing the client's strengths and bringing them to the forefront. In my case the other day, the wife she really doesn't want to go through this divorce. It's really upsetting her. And the fact that she doesn't want to go through it, and without us even asking, it was the very first meeting we had on Tuesday, she brought every single financial file that she's ever had and that they have ever had, and all paper clipped with a note on them. Like each one was organized amazingly. And so even though she didn't want to be at that table and she cried through the whole meeting, she had that. And as I affirmed her so hard about how awesome that was and how great that was, and everybody did. And even her spouse said, I really appreciate that. And just that one little thing maybe made her feel like she could come back to the table next week and that we're going to be able to move through this process. And again, unless a client believes change is possible, it's not going to happen. It's really probably the secret sauce that you need. So with those clients who have hit the saturation point, who are saying, I can't, who are so afraid, their brains aren't letting them move forward, if we help them believe their ability to change, we will start to see that they can do that. So we have to use affirmations. And I would say use them as much as you can. And this is going again. Why are we going again? There we go. Okay. So R is reflections. I'm sure we've all used reflections. We've heard about reflections. We probably talk about them a lot, and they're really important to use. And so I'm going to go through different types of reflections and how we can use them with our clients in really effective ways. So first is simple reflection. The simplest approach to responding to resistance is with non-resistance. And the simplest way to do that is repeating what your client just said. You're not changing it. You're not fighting it. You're just repeating it. You might not know exactly even what to say to the thing that your client just said. And that's another thing. It can save you a little bit of mental energy until you can actually think about what the next step would be. But more importantly, it acknowledges and validates what the client has said, and it could possibly elicit an opposite response. So I'm going to go through really quickly. The client is talking. We're talking about settlement options. And so the client says, we're talking about these again. She doesn't deserve any of my restricted stock units, and I refuse to consider any option that includes sharing them. So the professional says, sharing your RSUs would not work for you. So you do not want to see any settlement that has sharing RSUs as an option because she does not deserve them. Basically repeated exactly what the client said, maybe a little bit of a different order, but we even used the same words that the client used. And he says, well, it depends on the option, but no, I don't think, sorry, my thing's in the way. I don't think so because I should keep them. And so then the professional would say, okay, you're hoping to focus on options that would allow you to keep your RSUs, but then I think I heard you would discuss other options, right? And then so it goes on. Yes, if we can find a way to do that, I think it makes sense. And then he tells us why it makes sense. He was so resistant, but now he's saying they vest at different times, and I think it gets complicated and keeps us tied to one another. So one, they're vesting at different times, and he thinks the financial stuff is going to be hard. And the other thing he tells us is it keeps us tied to one another. So he wants clean break after this process. So you want options that divide assets in a simplified way and allow for financial autonomy after divorce. I am basically saying what he said back to him. He says yes. So then we say, here's sort of like some magic of us trying to say, okay, can we move you off that? So can you be open to hearing all of the options and working together to find one that meets both of your interests? The RSUs may be part of that option. Yes, I can be opening to listening to options. So this is a real case where we got the guy to actually be open. But all it took was, again, reflecting back to him the things. And then all of a sudden we heard they vest at different times and I don't want to be tied to her. Got it. Let's try to figure that out for them. Or not for them, with them. Okay, so now we have an amplified reflection. So this is just another strategy to reflect the client's statement, but we do it in an exaggerated form or like an extreme way, not sarcastic way, but in a more exaggerated form so they can hear it. And maybe they hear themselves a little bit differently, right? So here's an example. I don't know why he's so worried about this. The kids will be fine in a new house. So as a professional, we say, oh, so he's worrying needlessly. Now, they didn't say needlessly, but that's that exaggeration, right? About selling the marital residence. So he's worrying needlessly. I'm not saying there's nothing to be worried about, but I think we can work to make it okay for them. So again, I'm reflecting back with an exaggerated. You are confident that you can work together to help the kids adjust to new living arrangements. They didn't say they were confident. I'm one, affirming maybe a little bit, and two, I'm amplifying it for them. Yes, ideally, I would also like to find a way to keep the kids in the marital home, but if we can't afford it, I think we can help the kids adjust and feel good about a move. So now we're hearing, okay, wait a second. Now we're hearing maybe they want to see if they could stay in the marital residence. So that we might say exploring an option that might allow the kids to stay in the home may be important to you both. And then the both were like, yes. Whereas like at the beginning, we just heard him say, he doesn't care if selling the house, it'll be fine. By the end, he wanted to explore an option that made the kids, or that might have allowed the kids to stay in the house too. Again, all we did was reflect it back, but just reflecting it back in like this extreme way got them thinking and putting a little bit of affirmation in there. They didn't say they were confident, but I was confident that they could do it. Okay, and the last type of reflection strategy is a summary reflection. I have the bouquet of flowers there because I think about this as you're going through your meetings, whether they're your individual meetings or your joint meetings or the collaborative meetings, whatever, that you're picking up little nuggets or little bouquet, little flowers along the way that you're just holding in a bouquet to eventually present back to them when they're going to resist you, because they will. We know that they will. They're in change. They are going to resist us. So this is just acknowledging what the client has said right there in the meeting, that is the resistant statement, but also stating contrary things. So I have my bouquet of flowers of all this other stuff you said in the past that doesn't match what you just said. And so we have to remember those things, and we have to make sure that we're taking those opportunities and we're really listening again to our clients as they go through this process with us, that we're hearing their own goals and interests to help them move forward. They're not our goals and interests. These are all the flowers I picked that you were planting. I just am putting them back in this bouquet for you so that you have them. So here's an example. The client says, I know he wants me to agree to 50-50 custody, but that is ridiculous. And so then I would say, you acknowledged in your interest that you would like to have equal influence in the parenting of your children, and both have positive, healthy relationships with the kids. You've told us that the kids have adjusted well to his new home, yet it still seems ridiculous, mirrored back the word, for him to think about sharing 50-50 custody. What is a more desirable shared parenting option that meets your goals? So in previous meetings, I collected all those other things. They have she had an interest in equal influence of parenting the kids, that they both have positive, healthy relationships. When dad moved out of the home, that we started a shared parenting schedule that eased them in, and the kids were doing great. So what's ridiculous, right? But I didn't say that. I said, what's more desirable? And then we're going to hear that and then reflect it back. Again, I might bring out more of my flowers to give to them and reflect back. And we're really going to try to show the client that what they're saying is in opposition to what they said before. And they're going to talk themselves into the corner and then back out again, just by you giving them the flowers. Just keep reflecting back what they've said before. And I like to use their own words back to them. Okay, whoops. So now we're on to S. We're going to slow the pace, right? So when we slow down the process, it allows us to focus on the details and also process the feelings that the clients are having relative to the meaning of the resistance or of the change, right? Or of the situation that they're in. So slowing the pace can be super effective. So when we think about slowing down the pace, I want you not to think about being lazy or not doing work. We're actually going to be doing a lot more work, because when resistance is encountered, what I have found, and even in my therapy, when I was brand new doing therapy, I certainly wanted to just like speed up and maybe even pretend what they just said wasn't really said. And so maybe we change the topic, right? Or we speed up the meeting, because somehow if we go back to, oh, wait, that's not on the agenda. Let's go to item 2. We don't have time to talk about that. We got to get through our agenda, right? So somehow it'll magically disappear, or maybe like it'll just resolve itself by the end of the meeting. That would be pretty awesome for us, right? So sometimes we even like put the issue in the parking lot. Well, that wasn't on the agenda, so we'll write it on the parking lot and put it on the next agenda, or maybe whatever agenda it fits in down the road. So it's like this whole idea of like, we should just move on. This is too uncomfortable for all of us. And it's really, I try to think about it like if we had a broken leg and, we're trying to hobble into the meeting, we wouldn't just ignore the broken leg and be like, it'll fix itself. We'll just let it go for a while. It's the same thing with this. It's only going to get worse. The pain is going to get worse. The anger is going to get worse. The resistance is going to get worse. So we really have to slow the pace, acknowledge what the person has said so that we can intensify the work. We have to focus on and even magnify, put out there onto the table the client's internal struggles and help them to search for answers or make meaning or find a way to move themselves forward. So we really have to make sure that we're not causing this tension between the clients and ourselves by wanting just to speed up the meeting or ignore what we're doing, because they're going to be like, where are we going? Like, I don't want to go to your goal, Dr. Gilman, because I still have this thing that you put into this like mysterious parking lot. And I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it because I'm still really upset about it. So the tension should really be within the clients to face their inner struggles. And so what we can even do with that, I have this little phrase at the bottom. So it's like, okay, so they come in and they're all upset about maybe something that happened in between the meetings, and we're not even going to be able to get to the agenda because this thing is sitting there. And so we could say, in order for you to help me fully understand your world, let's go over this in slow motion and call it slow motion. Like, I really want to go into this, or let's role play it, or let's really think about it. I want to understand it. And we really slow down, and everybody in the room slows down too. And maybe we slow down even physically. So we start talking with a little bit more pause between our words. Maybe we take deep breaths and we have a little bit more, sit back in our seats. Like, we're all going to listen because we all want to understand what you have to say. So what I would say is the devil is in the details, and so is the solution. We have to make sure that each and every resistance statement by the client is fully addressed and processed so that we understand the client's world, and that we also show that we genuinely care and respect whatever it is they're going through that's making them be resistant, because we're going to more likely get to the heart of the matter. If we get to the heart of the matter, guess what we get to? The solution, right? If we skim over it and put it in the never-ending parking lot, we may never get to it. And then we may never get to the solution or resolution, and our clients end up kicking out because they don't feel like this process is for them. This isn't for me, right? Because no one's understanding them. So again, increase the silence to slow the pace. Using silence can actually do two very important things. One, it can create pressure to fill the space, as long as it's not one of us on the team who has that pressure. Some of us do. I have a really lovely colleague that I work with, and she's like, I'll be the first one to break. And it's like, I know, but just don't break, go to Brownie, and maybe it'll help you to not be able to talk. And then it allows time to think and feel. So it allows the clients time to think and to really understand how to put into words what they need. And it may also help us too, to just take that break. Resistant clients avoid both of these things, right? They don't want to really be the one that's doing the work. So they're not going to fill the space. They want you to fill the space, and they're going to argue with you about you filling the space. And they're not thinking or feeling. They don't want to think or feel about the future. It is scary and it is overwhelming. So without silence, we are like pushing our clients up those stairs of change, up those stairs, or, we're dragging them through that satir process, that mountain. It is such hard work, and it is so stress producing for the team and for you as the client or as the professional. If that's your client, you have the resistant client, the hard client. You feel like you're letting the team down. You start apologizing. I'm sorry, I worked with her for 5 hours yesterday before we came in the meeting. I have no idea why it's like this. Because you're fueling resistance. You're creating resistance with your client. So we need to slow our pace enough so that we are behind our clients in our understanding and awareness. Again, it's that naive puzzlement. I don't know what's going on, help us understand what's going on. That way you keep the clients explaining to you. They are now pulling you along, and it feels so much better to feel like you're in an environment where they are actually, again, they're feeling like they're in charge. That goes back to that control. We are letting go of the desire to be in charge, and we're letting them take the reins. And that is when the resistance is going to dissolve, because now they're explaining to us. When they're explaining to us, we get the details, we understand their world, we've taken time to do that. We're not worried we need to still be productive in our meetings, but we're not too worried about, going in their direction for a minute, and we're able to catch up with them, and then we can walk alongside of them. It's not going to be helpful for us to feel like we have to really pull them through this process, and they're not going to be successful. And we're going to be exhausted. We're going to burn out. We're going to have compassion fatigue, and we're going to start doing things that make us suffer in our marriages, in our other work, in our personal lives, being the best parents, siblings, daughters, whatever, sons, whatever we are. We're going to start failing at that because we're putting so much energy into our resistant clients, and it's just not going to get us anywhere. So what we have to think about is, what is the real challenge for our clients? So as we're gathering details, we always should be seeking to determine what feelings are present for them and what word is fitting into what they are experiencing. And we don't have to keep reflecting it back to them or saying it to them. We should just know what that is, and we should try to bring some of that to the forefront, or just allow it to be present in the room. Again, sometimes I think having feelings, even upset feelings in the room, don't feel good for us as the professional team, for all of us. So the woman I had on Tuesday who came in, she came in crying before we even all sat down at the table. She was upset. And so we processed that. We asked her about it. We talked to her about it. And it made so much, made all of us feel like we could be there with her, and we could help her as she's starting this process, and try to meet her where she is emotionally, so that we understand what she might need to be able to be successful in the process. And again, we ask, what's challenging here for you right now? And then, and what else? And what else, right? And she did really well being able to explain to us, and being able to explain to her spouse too, and have all of us sort of there with her in her world and what was important to her. And so many things came out for her that if we would have just said, yeah, the first meeting, it's really hard, we understand. Oh, so let's read the participation agreement, and then we'll keep moving on, and here's the tissue box. Like, we needed, before we did any of that, to give her that, I think it was maybe 7 minutes of talking. And then she was like, good. And then she was engaged. And then she felt, like she was heard by all of us, which was really fantastic. So the other thing that slowing the process down does for us is it's really allowing us to focus on where the clients are stuck. So if we were to tell this cat that maybe he needed to go on a diet, and that was probably why he got stuck in the door, he probably wouldn't even care or even think about it. Or like, next time, here's what you should do. I mean, the client is stuck. They don't really, they're not open to hearing anything really right now. And so sometimes in our process, we get resistance when we try to introduce new concepts to our clients when they're stuck in all of it. This guy just wants to get out of the stuck. And like, if we can talk about some of these things that allow the client to sort of take a step back, understand why they're stuck, how they're stuck, and maybe they can come up with their own solution, it can feel good. Again, when we're rushing through the meeting and we are sort of avoiding the fact that the cat's stuck in the door, and we're just talking like, yeah, well, you're stuck in the door, but we're just going to pretend it didn't happen, then we're not really focusing on where they're stuck. We're not getting to the heart, again, of the matter. And so the first thing that we should really be doing is finding the place where the client is stuck. When we're in that slowed down place and the work is intense, we have the time and the energy to sit with them and figure out where they're stuck. However, I will caution, I need a little bit of water. That's not what I'm cautioning you about. I'm cautioning you about getting sucked in, right? So as we're trying to discover and clarify where our client is stuck, it does not mean that you take on the stuckness as your problem. Otherwise, you end up like these guys in the quicksand where everybody is stuck. The team is stuck and no one knows what to do. And we're all feeling pretty helpless. And so it feels like we become the suckers, right? We become the people that are there to solve the problem. And so we can't take that bait, right? We don't accept the invitation to take the client's pain. We want to keep the ball in the client's court. And so a lot of times, one thing that teams may do or professionals may do is use the word we. How do we? Don't use we. You put it back on them. You. What are you going to do? Oh, geez, I don't know. What are you going to do about that? And so it makes them have to think about things, not us. We sort of inadvertently use that word we, and then they think, oh, they're in it too. They're going to solve our problem. But then, we get stuck with them. If the team is working harder than the clients are, you're sucked in. You've taken the bait, right? When you're trying to figure out all of the different solutions to how to get, Susie back to the table after the last meeting, then we're taking on way too much. We can talk to Susie and say, Susie, what's going to get you to come back to the meeting? She might say nothing. And then we have to have a conversation about that too. But we shouldn't be letting our clients hand us their problems and then letting them stay immobile. And again, if we become more concerned about the client's divorce or whatever the issue they're talking about at the table with us, we are neutralizing their motivation. They don't have to do anything or think about anything because it becomes our problem. And then who also gets the criticism? We do. Well, use your idea. It's like, oh, not Dr. Gilman's idea. I'm not giving anybody ideas, right? So it's just a matter of being able to just say, nope, I'm pushing this back on to you. The other thing is that clients want to ask advice from you. That you're getting sucked in. If they ask you for advice, you take the bait and then they, yes, but I can't. And yes, but I'm not going to. Again, if they start expressing problems without wanting to discuss alternatives, they're just sitting there complaining and blaming. That's another part where you might be getting sucked in, or they're trying to suck you in. Failing to do what they have expressed is needed. is another place where you can start feeling like you need to get sucked in and do more for them because they said they need to do this. They said this is important. Okay, well, when it's important to them, they will do it, right? Also, if they're framing problems as unsolvable, well, we know the answers. I mean, we're the professionals. We're really smart. We can give them these answers. And so when they helplessly throw these traps of unsolvable problems that, in our experience and all of our knowledge, we actually know how to solve them, we've taken the bait and we're stuck with them in that quicksand again. Because when we come up with those solutions, they're going to be mad at us for it. So I think in this, to find their stuckness, we just say, how is this a problem for you? How is this a problem for you? It seems like you guys are sure stuck. You can use that word stuck, what's keeping you stuck? Where is this? Where do you feel stuck? Just keep asking me some of these questions. You might know exactly where they're stuck. But again, they're going to go, yeah, but Dr. Gilman, yeah, but. So I just, it's my mojo to just say, I have no idea what you guys are going to do. This seems unsolvable. Well, then suddenly there are solutions, right? Okay. The other thing that you can do when you're stuck in a little bit of the client wanting to give us their problems is to shift focus. So we're going to shift the focus away from the obstacles and barriers that they're creating and they're trying to draw us into. And we're going to move in toward the client's interests. So we can give them an opportunity to affirm their own personal choice regarding how they're going to solve their own problem by shifting the focus. So I have a little example. So I am never, oh wait, this thing is blocking me from seeing. Sorry, I don't want to delete people or something. Okay, I'm never going to be able to retire if she is going to take everything I've worked for. I'm not giving her a penny from my pension. This is ridiculous. I'm not sure this process is even going to work if you all think this is even a viable solution. So how many people right there are like, I don't think it's a solution. What are you, we're not saying it's a solution. You keep your mouth closed, right? So to shift the focus. So, I should have said this was happening in the financial meeting, our second meeting where we're just seeing what accounts we have. No one's even talked about pensions and who's getting what. So the team says, you're way ahead of us. The purpose of this meeting is to identify and understand the assets and the debts. We're not ready yet to decide how the asset division fits into your goals. So how is this a problem for you right now? Why are you stuck on this right now? We're not even there yet. I can see it's going to be a problem down the road, right? We can all see it's going to be a problem down the road. But how is this a problem for you right now? And says, well, I want to be able to retire when I want to retire. And it seems to be the mentality of the team that I should be giving her everything. Again, we could fight with him about this, right? No one even said that. Why do you think that? We're not going to do that. We're just going to take what he says. And let's step back and think about adding this to your interests. Describe how this is a problem for you so that it accurately captures your hope for retirement. He says, well, I would like to have enough money to retire when I want to retire and be comfortable. I'm not working until I drop dead like my father did. Bing, 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 bing. We got it. We now understand why this is a problem for him. His dad ended up working himself to death. And this guy is like, I'm not going to do that. So we hit a nugget of something very, very important. So then we say, and how else is this a problem for you right now? The question, right? There's nothing else. I just want everyone to know I'm not working until I drop dead. And so you captured it in your interest adequately? Yes. Are you ready to continue going over the spreadsheet? Yes. Now imagine if we just were like, oh, well, in meeting 4, we're going to talk about options. We're not talking about options today. So, and no one said it was viable. No one's even thought about your pension yet. We're just checking to make sure. That meeting would have been a disaster, right? We needed to address it And why we needed to address it is when he tells us that something very, very personal happened to him. His father worked himself to death. And I think there's fear there for him. He does not want to do that. He has maybe loss. It's those old past hurts, the skeletons jumping out, right? Like, dad dropped dead at work. And actually his father did drop dead at work. He ended up having a heart attack at work. So that was even a bigger thing for this guy, right? So, I mean, if we would have jumped ahead and we would have said, we're just going to put dividing the pension in the parking lot, we would have had a useless meeting completely. He would have just gotten more resistant, right? And then he would have argued with us. He would have said the BS word. It would have been a dreadful meeting for Dr. Gilman, because it all goes on the coach, right? Just kidding. Okay. So then the other thing we can do that's similar to this when people are stuck, and this one's a little bit tricky, but I like it. It's called agreement with a twist. So it's a very subtle strategy to agree with the client. You're agreeing with their resistance, right? But we're twisting it a little bit so that it propels the discussion forward. And again, using the client's own interest makes this very effective, especially for our process. So why are all of you so stuck on my budget? What about all her spending? I have to live too. I'm not going to eat ramen while she eats filet mignon. The kids will think I'm a loser. So I will say something funny happened at that. One of the attorneys had no idea what ramen was. So it kind of lightened the mood a little bit, because she was like, wait a second, can you help me understand what's a ramen? And so we all had to sort of educate her a little bit on ramen noodles. And so it made it a little bit funny, but what we were able to do is agree, right? Here's the agreement. You've got a good point there. And it's one of your interests that the kids see you as equals. There's a bigger picture here. And maybe putting it on me, I haven't been paying enough attention to that. It's not as simple as one person's budget. I agree with you that the purpose of the budget is not to place blame, right? That's not why we do budgets. We're not trying to place blame. So we can agree, because he's like, hey, we're stuck on my budget. If we look deeper at what you both are working with, you may be able to see how you can meet both of your interests. Again, you may be able to see how you can meet your interests. So this is the agreement in green, and in the red, here's our twist. So we're taking it back to the interests, and we're saying, we agree, we're not placing blame with budgets. How are you guys going to meet your interests? We're putting it right back on them at the stuck place. Siding with the negative, again, when they're stuck. This isn't reverse psychology. Sometimes people think it is, but it's just taking up the negative voice. So again, siding with the negative is stating what the client has already said when they're arguing against change. Maybe we use an amplified reflection, and we're going to take the negative side, because what I'm hoping to do is get a yes, but from the client, but they're not yes, button me. They're yes, button themselves. It's so funny, right? We tricked them. Okay. So we're going to get them to express the other point of view. Whoops. I keep going backwards, y'all. I'm sorry. Okay. And this actually happened in a case. Dang, what is it doing? Okay. I have an overexcited mouse, I guess. So, okay. Client 1 says, well, I know some people who went to court and got a lot better deals than this. My sister said, we hear that a lot, right? Or whoever said, I'm a sucker if I agree to this. He's worth a lot more than I'm getting here. So then coach says, while we've spent a considerable time now going over your positive feelings and your concerns about your settlement options, but you still don't think you're ready to come to an agreement, or if you can even come to an agreement, maybe it would be a good idea to consult with a litigation attorney and see what he or she would say about the court process, especially if you really think all the options you came up with are not suitable for you. And this is the zinger. Some people really just need a judge to tell them what to do. And then client 2 jumps in like, yeah, but we wanted to stay out of court and make the decisions for our families ourselves. They took them back to their interests without us even having to do it. So then here's client one. She's yeah-butting herself. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to judge making these decisions for us this late in the game. I'm happy with the things we've agreed on. I just think we need to look at the length of support again. So there's the thing that she didn't want to agree to, right? Her sister's a sucker because she's not getting the length of support that she wants. That's all that it was, and we could revisit that. But I did that real zinger, like, yeah, I mean, some people need a judge to tell them what to do. And it's not in a mean way. I said it a little bit more nasty than I would say it at the table, right? Like I say it with a lot of compassion and love at the table, but they started to yeah, but themselves. And that's what we want. We don't want to yeah, but us. Yeah, but yourself, right? Okay. One of the last ones is responding to I don't know. Again, for these people that are exhausted, they're afraid, they don't know what the future really holds for them. They're going to maybe go to us. I don't know. Do you have a decision? I don't know. I can't think. I don't even know what to think. They're overwhelmed. This slide's a little bit crowded, but you can definitely look it over, in more detail. And I think I actually did a handout for this for you guys too. So even if the client is avoiding the answer, they do know, but they're not going to tell us. That's the avoiding the answer. A literal response to I don't know can reflect it and empathize with it. So at this moment, you're really stumped as you search for an answer. Right now, you're really stumped about what to do. It's very difficult for you to see a way to deal with this currently. So just like right now, all you're doing is a literal response. You just don't know what to do. And then be silent. If you feel like you really understand the I don't know, and that maybe if there's some background behind it, you can add a deficit statement. So like you're searching for new ways to approach this, or you really want some peace. The deficit statement is what you think they want, what you think they're searching for. You don't really know. Right now it's difficult for you to see how to deal with selling the house. You're trying to look for all the different ways you can to think about it. If you think that the client has said, I don't know, because they don't want to reveal something threatening about the reality, right? About him or herself. It's really difficult and scary to actually say out loud the truth about blah. Or you're really uncomfortable facing this aspect of your life. So if they're making these changes that to them, it's like shock right in the face, you can actually confront it in a really soft way by just saying, you'll use some empathy with this. This facing this divorce is making you really uncomfortable, or you're really uncomfortable thinking about the fact that you're not going to have your kids 50% of the time. That's really hard. If you think that I don't know is because they're trying to keep the peace, then you can respond similarly. You're concerned that if you provide the answer, it'll cause a lot of controversy and conflict among your family, something like that. Or your partner might take it the wrong way or whatever. Another thing we can do if they're really stumped is ask this miracle question. It really allows us to say, even if you don't know what a preferred future will like, or they're telling us they don't know what a preferred future will like, you can say something like, if you were to go to bed tonight, everything was how it was now, but you woke up in the morning and your problem was solved. How do you know? What would you know? How would you know the problem had been solved or the problem is no longer present? And then they have to start identifying, if you woke up because you were sleeping when the miracle happened, you woke up, how would you even know that this problem was gone? And that's when you can get them out of that I don't know place, because they're going to have to start pointing to things that they might know, change the problem for them or solve the problem for them. So rolling with resistance, right? I want you to think about your philosophy for resistance. I want you to think about the word resistance. Should we even be using that word? I don't think. I think we should say, How are we going to help our clients make progress? And what is keeping them from being able to have movement through our process? Let's reframe them so that we understand that we cannot have progress without resistance. And the fact that they're having resistance means that they're thinking about the changes that are really important in their lives. And we should be trying to understand their perspective and proceed from there. So resistance is actually offering an opportunity to respond in a new and maybe even surprising way, to take advantage of the fact that they're going to open up and tell us what's going on. And we don't even have to be confrontational about it. It's not us, it's them. So we don't have to think about it being any reflection on us or the process. It is normal. Resistance is normal. Okay. I'm done. I'm going to let you guys have a thought for a minute. Every time I do a presentation, I like to have 2 insights and an action. So I want you to jot down 2 things that you gained insight about today. And then without action, we don't do anything with our insights. So I would like you to take one of the insights, or maybe both those insights, and see how you could apply it into an action. And then the last thing I'll say is think about who else needs to hear this. Are there people on your team who need to hear this? Who else would you like to spread this word about resistance to? And then we'll take some questions if we have any. And I haven't been monitoring that because it's too much effort for me to do. I'm resisting. Actually, I don't feel competent doing it. So it's not really resistant. It's competence. Oh, my mouse keeps going backwards. Okay. Alicia, do you have any questions you could feed to me in our 5 minutes? I'm so sorry.
I think most importantly is they're all requesting your slides, and I have suggested that perhaps you could charge for them because there's so much interest.
I already uploaded them to the portal, whatever that is, where the thing is.
I think there are 2 documents there, but the PowerPoint isn't there.
Oh.
They're requesting. So if you don't mind sharing, you can give it to me and I will get it uploaded within 15 minutes.
Okay. How much do you suggest I charge? Just kidding. Anything else?
There was just a lot of positive feedback during your presentation. I think if they have specific questions, they can enter them in the chat now.
Okay. Or you guys can email me. Or message me through Pathable or something.
Here's one from Jeffrey. Are different approaches needed for resistance that is primarily anxiety-based versus primarily personality disordered?
Potentially, right? I think with the anxiety-based, it's going to be a lot of taking it slow and reassuring, doing the affirmations, taking baby steps. I would think sometimes a personality disorder, depending on what it is, might get a little bit frustrated and feel like we're talking down to them, or that they're being patronized too. So yeah, I think depending on the client, for sure, you're going to have to figure out, the needs of the client and what they're responding to and what they're not. And so these are a lot of really, I think, good techniques to, you can mix and match and find out what works for your particular client, and what works one meeting may not work the next. So that's the great thing about resistance, right? Is we're going to be on our toes a lot with them, but.
And then Jennifer asks, what do you do if someone in the room answers for the client?
Oh, you yell at them and kick them off the team, and we replace them with, no, I'm just kidding. We should, if someone answers for the client, I think just in the debrief, just handle it. Oh, this is good because it just made me think. I had a case where the wife was sort of having a difficult time getting to resolution. And I did use that, maybe the collaborative process isn't right for you right now. It wasn't the right choice for you because she was just so stuck. And after in our debrief, the husband's lawyer said to me, "Thank God you finally called her out." He's like, "I've been wanting to say she's not collaborative this whole time." And I was like, no, 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 no. I wasn't calling her out. I was trying to like use her resistance to get her to stay in the process. So I had to educate him a little bit, but he was like, yes, Dr. Gilman, you called her out on her, junk for all this time. And we resolved that case. We signed the MSA today. And it was like 3 months of working on the MSA language and resistance, but we did it. And she's happy. So that's good news.
Emily asks, how do you feel about doing financial discussions at the beginning of the process? Do you think that gets in the way of focusing on the feelings?
I don't think so, because there's feelings that are associated with the finances too. So I think throughout the whole process, the emotions are going to come up. And no matter what we're talking about, if it's the kids, if it's money, if it's vacation, I mean, all of these things come up and they all have emotions that are attached to them. So you just roll with it. Everything that comes up at the table, if you feel like, we can handle this, we have a toolkit full of all kinds of great things, then you'll be able to manage it at the table.
Sorry, we have a multitude of great comments coming in and positive feedback.
Thank you.
Trying to find more questions as I saw some of them coming in.
I have a new view of the parking lot. Yeah, Barbara, I mean, it's not that great. Sometimes it is, but if we're putting emotions in the parking lot, so totally not great.
Do you have a suggested follow-up question to the miracle question if a client responds with, I don't know?
Well, I might just say, what if your neighbor walked in the door and they noticed the problem wasn't gone? Sometimes if you externalize it for clients, then they can feel like maybe they're not on the hot seat so much. And so it allows them to, what if your best friend, what if your mom, what if your kids walked in the door and the problem was gone? And then that can take them out of their own thinking and go into someone else's.
And with that, I'm going to call your time because I have a feeling otherwise you'll be here all night. But the chat is available. So if you have continued questions for Dr. Gilman, you can enter them in the chat. You can use the conversation area on Passable to reach out to Dr. Gilman directly. The recording of the session takes about 30 minutes to render, and then that will be available under this agenda item on your Passable agenda. So give us about 30 minutes. It should be there for those of you that are already saying you're eager to rewatch. And then once I have the file, I'll get it uploaded, and you'll be able to find that next to the chat, polls, people, and files for this session as well. So thank you all for your active participation and wonderful feedback for Dr. Gilman during the session. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your forum experience.
Thank you, guys.